The first thing I noticed when I woke up from the coma was the unfamiliar ceiling. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a steady beeping keeping time with my heartbeat. The second thing I noticed was that I was alone. No Michael, my husband of 5 years. No Marie and Robert, my in-laws who had promised to be there every step of the way. Just me, Hannah Mitchell, age 33, surrounded by medical equipment in a rehabilitation facility I didn't recognize. Ms. Mitchell? A nurse appeared in my field of vision, her kind face creased with concern. Try not to move too much. You're at Oakwood Rehabilitation Center. Do you remember what happened? I did, in fragments. The screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal. Michael's voice screaming my name. Then darkness. The accident, I whispered, my voice rough from disuse. How long? You've been in a coma for 4 months, she said gently. Your husband. I'm so sorry, but he didn't survive the crash. The words hit me like physical blows. 4 months. Michael dead. The room started spinning, and I heard the heart monitor's steady beeping accelerate into a frantic rhythm. Where are Marie and Robert? I managed to ask. My in-laws, they should be here. The nurse's expression changed, just slightly, but enough for me to know something was wrong. I'll contact your caseworker, she said, avoiding my eyes. She'll be able to explain everything. Everything turned out to be worse than I could have imagined. Jessica Chen, my caseworker, arrived an hour later, carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression that suggested she was about to deliver bad news. She wasn't wrong. Mrs. Mitchell, she began, then corrected herself. Ms. Mitchell, I need to inform you about some developments that occurred while you were unconscious. The developments unfolded like a nightmare. 2 months into my coma, Marie and Robert had cleared out the house I shared with Michael, the house that had been in his family for 3 generations. They changed the locks, canceled my phone service, and even tried to access my personal bank accounts using the power of attorney they'd been granted for my medical care. They claimed they were acting in your best interests. Jessica explained, her tone carefully neutral. Said they were protecting family assets since you and Michael never had children. I closed my eyes, remembering all the fertility treatments we tried, all the disappointments. Marie had been sympathetic then, holding my hand through failed IVF attempts, assuring me I was still family. What happened to my things? Jessica hesitated. They sold most of it. Furniture, clothes, personal items. They said they needed the money for your medical care. But I have insurance, I protested. Good insurance. Michael made sure. Yes, Jessica confirmed. Your medical care was fully covered. We've been trying to contact them about this discrepancy, but they've retained a lawyer and aren't responding to our inquiries. I lay back against the pillows, trying to process this betrayal. Marie and Robert had been like parents to me since I met Michael in college. My own parents died in a car accident when I was 19. Another cruel irony, and Michael's family had embraced me completely. Or so I thought. There's more, Jessica said quietly. They filed a petition to have you removed from the family trust. Michael had set it up so you would inherit his share, but they're claiming that since you were both so young when he wrote the will, he never intended for you to inherit if something happened this early. A memory surfaced. Michael and I sitting in our home office late one night reviewing our estate planning documents. He'd been insistent about getting everything in order, especially after we started the fertility treatments. Honey, we need to be prepared for anything, he'd said, squeezing my hand. I want to make sure you're taken care of, no matter what. I teased him about being paranoid, but he'd been serious. I know my parents, he'd said. They can be difficult about money. I've seen how they treated my aunt when my uncle died. I won't let that happen to you. Now, lying in the sterile hospital room, I realized he'd known his parents better than I did. The house, I said suddenly, remembering something else from that night. The security system. Jessica leaned forward. What about it? Michael installed a new security system last year. Cameras everywhere, inside and out. He was worried about break-ins in the neighborhood. I tried to sit up straighter, ignoring the protest from my muscles. The footage backs up to a cloud server. Michael gave me the login information, made me memorize it. I recited the credentials to Jessica, who quickly typed them into her tablet. Her eyes widened as she accessed the account. It's all here, she breathed. 4 months of footage, including them clearing out my house. I finished. every moment of it. That night, after Jessica left with copies of the security footage, I lay awake thinking about the last conversation I'd had with Marie and Robert. It was the morning of the accident. We'd all had breakfast together. Marie had made her famous blueberry pancakes, and Robert was talking about their upcoming cruise. "We're thinking of selling the vacation house in Florida," Marie had mentioned casually. "It's just sitting there empty most of the year." "That house is part of Michael's inheritance," I pointed out. "Shouldn't he be part of that decision?" Something had flashed in Marie's eyes then. Something I couldn't quite identify. "Family takes care of family," she'd said, her voice just a touch too sweet. "We know what's best." Hours later, a drunk driver would run a red light, shattering my world forever. And while I lay unconscious, the people I trusted most proved exactly how little family meant to them. The next few weeks were a blur of physical therapy and legal meetings. My body had to relearn basic movements while my mind struggled to accept my new reality. The security footage proved to be damning. Not only had Marie and Robert cleared out my house, but they'd done it with an efficiency that suggested planning. They started moving things out just 3 weeks after the accident, my lawyer, David Morrison, explained as we reviewed the footage. "Before any doctors had made long-term predictions about your condition. The cameras had caught everything." Marie methodically going through my closet, commenting on the designer clothes Michael had bought me. "She never deserved these." Robert in Michael's office, prying open the safe where we kept our important documents. "She's not going to need these anymore." Both of them in our bedroom, discovering the fertility medication I hidden in my nightstand. "Couldn't even give him children," Marie had sneered, tossing the expensive medication in a garbage bag. What kind of wife was she? But the most damning footage came from the living room, 3 days after they changed the locks. Marie and Robert sat on my couch, the one Michael and I had picked out together on our first wedding anniversary, drinking wine and discussing their plans. "Once we get control of the trust, we can sell this place," Robert was saying. "No reason to keep it now. Michael always was too sentimental about this house." "What if she wakes up?" Marie asked, swirling her wine. "She won't." Robert's voice was cold. "And even if she does, who's going to believe her? We're his parents. We're grieving. We're just doing what's best for the family." David Morrison turned out to be exactly the kind of lawyer I needed. Methodical, thorough, and quietly ruthless. While I focused on my physical therapy, relearning how to walk and regaining my strength, he built our case piece by piece. "They made 3 critical mistakes," he explained during one of our strategy sessions. "First, they abused the power of attorney, which was strictly for medical decisions. Second, they sold your personal property without any legal right to do so. And third," he smiled grimly, "they did it all on camera." The security footage became our secret weapon. Every box they packed, every item they sold, every conversation they had while dismantling my life. All of it documented in high definition with clear audio. Michael's paranoia about home security had turned out to be our salvation. "But we're not going to show our hand yet," David advised. "Let them dig themselves deeper." And dig they did. As I grew stronger in rehab, Marie and Robert grew bolder. They filed additional legal motions trying to claim Michael's life insurance, arguing that since I was in a coma when he died, I hadn't been his wife in practice at the time of his death. They tried to access our joint investment accounts, claiming they needed to protect Michael's assets. They even attempted to sell our house, the one Michael had inherited from his grandmother, only to be stopped by a clause in the deed requiring my signature. Through it all, they never visited me. Not once. "They've been telling people you're brain damaged," my former neighbor, Lucy, told me when she visited. "That you'll never recover, that it's a blessing you and Michael never had children." I absorbed this information quietly, adding it to the growing file David was building. Every cruel comment, every attempted theft, every lie they told, all of it would come back to haunt them. By the time I was released from rehab, 3 months after waking up, I had a plan. A plan worthy of the careful, methodical man I'd married. "Are you sure about this?" David asked when I outlined what I wanted to do. "We could just file the lawsuits, present the evidence in court. You don't have to confront them personally." But I did. I needed to look in their eyes when their world crumbled, just as they dismantled mine while I lay unconscious. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Marie and Robert were hosting their annual Christmas party, an elaborate affair they used to showcase their standing in the community. In previous years, I'd helped Marie plan it, arranging caterers and decorating the massive Christmas tree in their formal living room. This year, they hadn't even told me about it. I learned the details from Lucy, who was still on their guest list. "Everyone will be there," she reported. "Their lawyer, their friends from the country club, all the people they've been lying to about you." Perfect. The night of the party, I dressed carefully in one of the few outfits I'd managed to salvage, a black cocktail dress Michael had given me for our last anniversary. My hair was shorter now, cut to hide the scars from the accident, but the dress still fit perfectly. I'd lost weight during my coma, but physical therapy had restored most of my strength. David arrived at exactly 8:30 when the party would be in full swing. He carried a thick briefcase and wore an expression of grim satisfaction. "Ready?" I took a deep breath, touching the USB drive in my clutch. A copy of the most damning security footage. Ready. The look on Marie's face when she opened the door was almost worth everything I'd been through. She went pale, then red, then pale again, her perfectly made-up face contorting in shock. "Hannah," she gasped. "What are you? You can't be here." "Hello, Marie," I said pleasantly, stepping past her into the foyer. Lovely party, just like old times. The buzz of conversation in the living room died as I walked in, David right behind me. Robert was holding court by the fireplace, drink in hand, but the crystal tumbler slipped from his fingers when he saw me, shattering on the marble hearth. "I hope I'm not interrupting," I announced to the silent room. "I just thought it was time we all had a frank discussion about family, trust, and security cameras." Marie grabbed my arm, trying to pull me toward the kitchen. "Hannah, you're clearly not well. Let me call someone to take you." "I'm perfectly well," I said loudly, pulling free. "In fact, I'm well enough to show everyone exactly what you and Robert did while I was in a coma." "David?" My lawyer stepped forward, opening his briefcase. He pulled out multiple copies of a thick document, our formal legal complaint, and began distributing them to key people in the room. The country club president, their pastor, their lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as he scanned the first page. "What is this nonsense?" Robert blustered, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "This," I said, pulling out my phone and connecting it to their elaborate entertainment system, another of Michael's installations I still had access to, "is what really happened while I was fighting for my life." The security footage played on their massive TV screen, crystal clear and devastating. Marie and Robert methodically looting my house. Their cruel comments about my inability to have children. Their plans to steal Michael's inheritance. The dozens of lies they told, all captured in perfect digital clarity. The room grew so quiet you could hear every word from the footage. "She never deserved him anyway." Marie's recorded voice rang out. "Once we get rid of her things, it'll be like she was never here." "Michael would have divorced her eventually," Robert added on screen. "We're just speeding up the inevitable." I let the footage play for exactly 5 minutes, long enough for everyone to understand, not long enough for Marie and Robert to recover from their shock and try to stop it. While I was in a coma, I said into the silence that followed, "These people, who called themselves my family, stole over $200,000 worth of my personal property. They tried to steal my house. They attempted to claim my husband's life insurance. And they did it all while telling everyone here that I was brain damaged and never going to recover." "It's not what it looks like," Marie started, but their lawyer cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Don't say another word," he advised, already packing his briefcase. "Mrs. Mitchell, my office will be in touch about a settlement." That was just the beginning of the exodus. The country club president and his wife left without a word, their faces stiff with disapproval. The pastor stopped only long enough to say a quiet prayer over me. Within 15 minutes, the house was almost empty. "You've ruined us," Robert snarled once we were alone. "Our reputation." "Your reputation." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You tried to steal everything from me while I was fighting for my life. You sold my clothes, my jewelry, even the fertility medications I've been taking. Do you know what Michael told me about those treatments?" Marie shook her head mutely. "He said even if they never worked, even if we never had children, I was all the family he needed. He said his parents had taught him that family stands by each other no matter what." I stepped closer to them. "Guess he was wrong about that last part." "We can explain." Marie tried again, tears streaming down her face. "We were grieving. Save it for the court, David interrupted. You'll be receiving formal notice tomorrow. We're suing for the return of all stolen property, the value of everything you sold, punitive damages for emotional distress, and criminal charges for abuse of power of attorney. You can't prove, Robert began. We have 712 hours of security footage I cut in. Every conversation, every theft, every lie. Michael installed those cameras to protect his family. I guess they served their purpose, just not the way he expected. I turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing, I'm pregnant. They both stared at me in shock. The last round of IVF took, I explained. We found out the morning of the accident. Michael knew he was going to be a father. He just didn't live to tell anyone else. I rested my hand on my still flat stomach. Funny how you were so quick to say we'd never have children, when all the time. Marie collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Robert just stood there, his face ashen, as the full impact of what they'd done, and what they'd lost, hit him. Your grandchild will never know you, I said quietly. That's not my choice, it's the consequence of yours. 3 months later, I sat in my restored living room, watching the sunset through windows that once again felt like mine. Most of my belongings had been returned or replaced as part of the settlement. Marie and Robert had been forced to sell their vacation home to pay the damages, and the security footage had ensured they'd never again be welcome in the social circles they'd valued so much. The baby kicked, and I smiled, running my hand over my growing belly. Your daddy was so smart, I whispered. He knew exactly how to protect us, even after he was gone. The nursery was coming along nicely, painted in soft greens and yellows. Lucy helped me set it up, along with other neighbors who'd reached out after learning the truth. Michael's Aunt Jane, the one his parents had tried to cheat after his uncle died, had become a regular visitor, sharing stories about Michael's childhood and promising to help with the baby. You know what the saddest part is? She said during one visit. They lost everything that really mattered. Their son, their grandchild, their family name, trying to hold on to things that didn't. She was right. In trying to protect family assets, Marie and Robert had destroyed the very thing they claimed to value most. They'd never meet their grandchild, never know the joy of being part of this baby's life. Their greed had cost them the one thing money couldn't buy, family. As I felt another kick, stronger this time, I thought about the lessons I'd learned, about how family isn't always who you're born to or who you marry into. Sometimes it's the neighbor who brings you soup when you're sick, the aunt who shares precious memories, or the husband who loves you so much he plans for your protection even after he's gone. And sometimes family is the tiny life growing inside you, promising a future filled with the kind of love that can't be measured in dollars and cents. Michael had known that. He'd understood that real family, true family, isn't about assets or inheritances or social standing. It's about love, trust, and standing by each other through the darkest times. As the sun set on another day, I smiled, thinking of the security cameras still quietly recording, protecting us just as Michael had intended. Some might call it paranoid, but I called it love. The tangible, practical, thoughtful love of a man who'd known exactly what his family might face, and made sure we'd never face it alone.